I never thought my own sister would shut me out of the only home I'd ever known. It's funny how the smallest moments, a sticky note on the fridge, a sideways glance across the dinner table, a slammed door, can add up over the years until one day, the whole house goes silent and you realize you've been left outside. The day Madison changed the locks, I understood, finally and completely, that everything had come undone. Late August in Asheville lingers on the skin, a sticky warmth pressed between thunderstorms and the promise of autumn. The cicadas' song hummed in the background as I turned my car onto Oakview Drive, my old backpack tossed in the passenger seat and the taste of a failed job interview still bitter in my mouth. My mind spun with worries, about the dwindling balance in my checking account, about the silence from every application I'd sent, about how I'd explain to my parents, again, that no one wanted to hire a designer with dreams bigger than her resume. But underneath it all, I clung to a thin thread of hope that home was still a place I could land. The Carson house sat at the top of the block, all white trim and brick, the sort of place that people notice, the kind of place my mother polished to perfection and my father measured with exacting eyes. The yard was clipped and green, and the porch lights had already flicked on against the coming dusk. For a moment, I paused in the driveway, letting the engine tick and cool, breathing in the cicada chorus and the distant sound of a lawnmower somewhere up the street. It should have felt welcoming. But as I stepped out, the weight of my bag dug into my shoulder, and an uneasy chill crept over me. I fished my keys from my purse, out of habit, my old bronze one with the tiny yellow sticker still on it from college. The front door greeted me with a heavy silence. I slid the key in, twisted, and nothing. The lock wouldn't budge. I frowned, jiggled it, tried again, but the metal scraped uselessly inside the cylinder. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe I'd grabbed the wrong key, but no, there it was, same shape, same scratches, the one I'd used for years. I stepped back and stared at the house, half expecting Madison to pop up in the window, phone in hand, that familiar smirk on her face. But the curtains were drawn, and all I could see was my own reflection, anxious and a little bit lost. I circled to the side door by the garage, my mind racing with explanations. Maybe the locks were changed for security, maybe someone just forgot to tell me. The side door wouldn't open either. My key turned halfway, then caught. Frustration simmered into panic. My heart began to thump, heavy and hollow. I tried the back door, pushing past the hydrangea bush Grandma Tracy once planted. The door was as stubborn as the others. 3 doors, 3 dead ends. Sweat prickled along my spine, the humidity pressed in. It felt like the house was pushing me away, rejecting me with every useless attempt. I pulled out my phone and dialed Madison first. It went straight to voicemail. No surprise, she'd become an expert at selective silence ever since I'd moved back home. I called Mom next. Please leave your message after the tone. I tried Dad, knowing he probably wouldn't pick up even if he saw my name. No answer. That's when my phone buzzed with a new text. Madison's name flashed on the screen, and I opened it, hope flickering for a second. You're not part of this family anymore. Don't come back. That was it. 10 words, cold as the steel lock in my hand. For a long moment, I just stood there, my thumb hovering over the screen, reading and rereading the message as if it might rearrange itself into something softer. My mind tried to rationalize, maybe this was some kind of joke, or a punishment that would pass by dinner. But I knew my sister's tone. She didn't threaten. She decided. My body moved on its own, walking back to the front porch, knocking hard, then pounding until my hand hurt. Madison. Open the door. Mom? Dad? The only answer was the low whir of the air conditioner cycling on inside. I could almost hear them in there, plates clinking, the TV low, the gentle cadence of a normal evening without me. A neighbor's voice startled me. "Emily? Everything okay?" Mrs. Larson, from 2 doors down, stood at her mailbox, concern creasing her face. For a moment I wanted to cry, to spill everything right there on the porch, but pride held me back. "Just locked myself out," I lied, offering a brittle smile. She nodded, uncertain, before heading back inside. Shame burned in my cheeks. I backed down the steps, the ache in my chest deepening with every step away from the house. I called Madison again, voicemail. I texted Mom, "Did you change the locks? What's going on?" No reply. I tried Dad, writing, "Please, just let me talk." Nothing. With nowhere else to go, I drove to a strip of motels by the highway, neon signs flickering in the heavy air. I handed over what little cash I had left for a room, the clerk barely glancing at me as he slid the key card across the desk. The room was small, the carpet worn thin, the air conditioner rattling above a faded armchair. I tossed my bag on the bed and sat down, staring at the walls, waiting for the panic to ebb. But it didn't. If anything, the silence got heavier, the room closing in as the reality hit. I had nowhere to go, no one to call, no way to make sense of how quickly my life had been cut in two. I thought about Grandma Tracy, about how she used to tell me, "Home is where people are glad you show up." She'd always seen something in me that no one else did. Now, even her memory felt like a door I couldn't open. Lying on the lumpy mattress, I tried to piece together what I'd done to deserve this. Was it that last fight with Madison? Was it because I couldn't be the daughter my parents wanted? All those old wounds bubbled up, Madison's smug comments, Mom's sighs, Dad's silence. Maybe this was just the final straw, one betrayal too many, finally tipping the scale. I scrolled through my phone, desperate for a distraction, for a lifeline, an old friend, a new job, any thread to pull me back. My eyes burned. Outside, traffic hummed along the highway, indifferent. I kept waiting for my phone to light up, for someone, anyone, to check on me. But the notification stayed silent. As I drifted between restless sleep and anxious waking, I realized I wasn't just locked out of the house, I'd been locked out of the idea of family, too. I thought of all the times I'd come home expecting comfort and found only rules, expectations, and the cold sting of comparison. Just as I finally started to drift, my phone buzzed in the dark. The number was unfamiliar, no name attached. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, heart racing with hope and dread. Sometimes, the future starts with a single, unexpected call. And as I stared at the phone's glow, I wondered if I was finally about to get some answers, or if this was just another door closing behind me. Waking up in a strange bed, in a motel that smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and old coffee, was the kind of thing I used to joke about with friends. When life goes off the rails, at least you get a story to tell. But there was nothing funny about that morning. The sheets were stiff, the air heavy. I lay still for a moment, staring at the faded water stains on the ceiling, trying to remember when my life had last felt like my own. I reached for my phone and saw nothing, no missed calls, no texts, just the persistent ache of being forgotten. I could have called someone, an old friend from high school, maybe, or one of my coworkers from my last temp job, but shame kept my finger from pressing send. It's amazing how quickly you learn to hide when you're at your lowest, how you shrink from the world, afraid of what people will think when they see you've failed. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching a slant of sunlight crawl across the carpet. My stomach growled, so I threw on yesterday's jeans and headed out to the diner next door. The place was mostly empty except for a trucker at the counter and an older couple sipping coffee in a corner booth. I slid into a seat by the window and ordered eggs and toast from a waitress who looked at me with the practiced indifference of someone who's seen every kind of story. As I picked up my food, I found myself drifting back into memory, safe places I hadn't visited in a long time. Christmas mornings at the Carson house, when the tree in the living room sparkled with Grandma Tracy's old ornaments and the whole place buzzed with excitement. Madison was always the star, tearing open the biggest presents, performing songs she'd learned at school, basking in the glow of our parents' pride. I can still hear Dad's deep laugh, Mom's delighted exclamations, "Oh, Madison, you're a natural." Me? I'd sit cross-legged near the fireplace, working quietly on my sketchpad, half hoping someone would notice the little drawings I tucked into their stockings. Grandma Tracy always did. She'd kneel beside me and say, "Show me what you've made this year, sweetheart," her eyes lighting up as she turned the pages. She was the only one who ever asked, "You've got something special, Emily. Don't ever let them convince you otherwise." But the years rolled on. I watched as Madison's trophies lined the family room shelves, each one a silent reminder that I didn't quite measure up. School awards, perfect report cards, student council victories, Madison collected them all. Mom would mention her successes to anyone who'd listen, while my own small wins were quickly overshadowed. "That's nice, Emily," she'd say with a distracted smile, barely glancing at my latest drawing before hurrying off to help Madison prepare for her next big event. Even now, the sting of those moments lingered. At the time, I tried not to let it show, but a child knows when she's being compared, and when she's found lacking. After breakfast, with nowhere else to go, I drove back to Oakview Drive. The sight of the house made my heart ache. It looked exactly the same as always, perfectly maintained, standing proud under the North Carolina sun. For a fleeting second, I wondered if it had all been a misunderstanding, if Madison would throw open the door and laugh, call it some kind of twisted joke. But as I walked up the path, I saw her silhouette through the window, head down, phone pressed to her ear. I knocked, waiting for footsteps, for any sign of welcome. Nothing. I knocked again, louder. Finally, Madison's face appeared on the other side of the glass, tight and impassive. "I just need my things," I said, my voice muffled by the door. She didn't even unlock it. "Leave, Emily. You're not coming in. I boxed up your stuff, you can get it Saturday at noon." "That's it. Madison, please. Just let me talk to Mom. She doesn't want to talk. None of us do." Her voice was flat, unyielding, and then she was gone. I stood there for a long minute, listening to the hum of the refrigerator inside, smelling something baking, maybe the banana bread Mom used to make when things got tense. I wanted to scream, to pound on the door until my hands hurt, but I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked away, feeling every inch of that rejection settle in my bones. Halfway down the block, Mrs. Larson was watering her roses. She looked up, catching my eye. "Everything all right, dear?" I hesitated, managing a weak smile. "Just a family thing, Mrs. Larson. Nothing to worry about." She nodded, lips pressed in concern. "Well, if you need anything, you know where I am." There was kindness in her voice, but also a trace of caution, like she didn't want to get pulled into the storm she sensed brewing. I thanked her, wishing I could take her up on it, but I kept walking. Back in the motel room, the hours passed in a blur. I watched TV with the sound off, scrolled through social media, seeing smiling faces, celebrations, everything I felt cut off from. I wondered if my family was sitting down to dinner without me. The thought stung, but a part of me wanted to see, needed to see. So as dusk settled, I drove back to Oakview, parking in the shadows across the street. Through the lit dining room window, I could make out my mother setting plates, Madison laughing at something on her phone, Dad pouring iced tea into glasses. It was all so normal, so heartbreakingly normal. They were moving on, eating together, sharing stories. No empty seat, no mention of me, no sign that the world inside had changed at all. In that moment, I felt like a ghost, someone who had slipped out of their lives, leaving barely a ripple. I watched them for a while, the warmth of their laughter muffled by glass and distance. Eventually, the porch light clicked off, and I drove away, feeling emptier than ever. When I got back to my motel, my phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "Urgent, legal matter, Tracy Carson Trust." I stared at the screen, my heart thudding. For a moment, I could almost hear Grandma Tracy's voice, steady, warm, reminding me that even when you feel cut off from everything, the past still has a way of reaching out. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. Sometimes, hope arrives in the most unexpected envelope. Or in my case, an email with a subject line so formal and jarring it made my hand shake, "Urgent, legal matter, Tracy Carson Trust." I must have read it 10 times before working up the nerve to open it, half convinced it was spam or some last cruel joke from Madison. But the sender was real, Edward Nash, attorney at law, downtown Asheville. The words inside were brief, "All business. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience regarding an important matter related to the Tracy Carson Trust." I barely slept that night, lying in my motel bed, the ceiling fan casting slow-moving shadows across the walls. All I could think about was Grandma Tracy, her hand steady as she showed me how to thread a needle, the way she'd say, "Real family protects each other, Em. Remember that, no matter what." Had she known something I didn't? Was this trust her last effort to reach me, even now? By the next afternoon, I'd mustered the courage to shower, put on my best blouse, and head downtown. The law office building was a glass and steel box that felt out of place in Asheville's patchwork hills, sleek and intimidating. I stood in the lobby for a minute, smoothing my hair, swallowing my nerves. The receptionist greeted me with a smile so practiced it made me feel even smaller, but she kindly offered water and ushered me to a seat. I caught a glimpse of myself in a polished window, drawn, tired, somehow both younger and older than I remembered. After a few minutes, Edward Nash appeared. He was tall, maybe in his late 50s, with silver hair and a gentle, unhurried way of speaking. "Emily Carson?" he asked, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." His office was the opposite of my world lately, quiet, sunlit, full of order and expensive-looking books. I perched at the edge of a leather chair, trying not to fidget. Edward sat across from me, folding his hands on the desk. "I understand things are difficult right now," he began, not unkindly. "I'm sorry for your loss. Your grandmother, Tracy, was a remarkable woman." "She was," I said, surprised by how rough my voice sounded. He nodded, shuffling a stack of papers. "She set up a trust some years ago, and I'm here to explain what it means for you." I stared at him, trying to piece together why Madison and my parents had never mentioned any of this. Edward glanced at my expression, then slid a folder across the desk. "Tracy Carson established the trust specifically to protect your interests, Emily. She wanted to ensure you'd always have a safe place to live, and a way to pursue your creative work. According to the trust, you have the legal right to reside in the Carson family home whenever you wish, for as long as you wish. And there is a substantial fund set aside for your artistic endeavors, a fund only you can access." The words washed over me, dizzying in their kindness. For a heartbeat, I could almost feel Grandma Tracy's hand on my shoulder, her voice in my ear, "Don't let anyone clip your wings." But then a new fear crept in. If all this is true, why didn't anyone tell me? I asked. Edward's face grew serious. The trust was administered by your parents and Madison. They had an obligation to inform you. Our records show that they made repeated withdrawals from the Creative Fund over the past several years, but not for its intended purpose. He opened the folder, revealing numbers and notations I barely understood: home renovations, luxury appliances, expenses that had nothing to do with me. They used my money? The question came out small, almost childlike. I'm afraid so. I know this is a lot to take in. His voice softened, but his professionalism didn't waver. There are remedies available to you. The trust's protections are robust. Your grandmother anticipated, perhaps, that there could be family disagreements. A strange mixture of outrage and relief warred in my chest. Madison and my parents hadn't just shut me out, they'd stolen what Grandma Tracy had meant for me. Yet, in this moment, I also felt the faintest glimmer of strength, proof that, even now, someone was still on my side. Edward reached into a drawer and handed me a pale blue envelope, the handwriting on the front instantly familiar. Your grandmother left this letter for you, he said gently. She asked that you read it if ever you needed guidance. I took the envelope with trembling hands, feeling the weight of all the years, all the missed conversations and the words I'd needed so badly to hear. I opened it slowly, smoothing the creases, and began to read. My dearest Emily. If you're reading this, it means things have become very hard. I want you to remember, being different is a gift, not a burden. I have watched you grow, create, imagine, and love with all your heart. That's what this trust is for, to give you room to chase your dreams, to be safe when life gets rough. Don't let anyone make you small, sweetheart. I loved your mother, your sister, and your father too, but I saw how lonely you felt sometimes. If you ever need help, if you ever need a home, this is my promise to you. You are stronger than you know. Never be afraid to fight for your own light. All my love, always, Grandma Tracy. The words blurred and ran as tears welled in my eyes. I read the letter twice, 3 times, clutching it to my chest. All the loneliness of the past days, all the years of not being seen, seemed to lift, just a little. Grandma Tracy hadn't just left me money or a room, she'd left me a lifeline, a belief that I was worthy, even if my own family didn't see it. Edward waited, letting me have my moment. Finally, he cleared his throat. You have options, Emily. The trust can be enforced. You can reclaim your place, both in the house and in your own future. I'll help you, if you want to fight for what's yours. I looked up at him, the sunlight catching the edge of the desk, and realized for the first time in days that I had choices. Power, even. Not just because of the law, but because of the love and faith Grandma Tracy had placed in me, a power Madison and my parents could never touch. As I slipped the letter back into my bag, Edward's words lingered. You have a choice, Emily. Do you want to fight for what's yours? Standing up for myself felt foreign, like wearing shoes 2 sizes too big. The idea that I might actually have the right, even the power, to fight back was dizzying and terrifying in equal measure. I'd spent most of my life adapting to other people's expectations, tiptoeing around family storms, shrinking myself when things got loud. Now, I was being asked to push back, to draw a line in the sand. It was a new kind of loneliness. Grandma Tracy always said, "You're stronger than you think." I hoped she was right. I spent most of the next day curled up on my motel bed, trust documents spread out around me like puzzle pieces. Edward Nash had emailed me the official summaries and a breakdown of every withdrawal my family had made from the Creative Fund. There, in black and white, were the details: Madison's kitchen renovation, a brand new deck out back, a payment for a trip to Hilton Head last summer. Not a dime for fabric, classes, or anything that could be called creative work. The numbers hurt almost as much as the rejection. My phone buzzed on the comforter. It was Justin, my cousin on Dad's side. We'd been close as kids, but life and distance had kept us in different circles for years. I'd texted him a vague need to talk the night before, half expecting he'd be too busy or too polite to respond. But Justin wrote, "Coffee? My treat. Let's talk about burning down the house, figuratively, of course." I smiled for the first time in days. Downtown Asheville felt alive that morning. College students on bikes, artists sketching on the sidewalk, a dog barking at a passing mailman. We met at a cafe painted bright teal, the kind of place with mismatched mugs and more plants than tables. Justin waved from a corner table, his brown hair longer than I remembered, his grin just as crooked. He pulled me into a quick hug. Well, Emily Carson. Stirring up family drama? Color me intrigued. I rolled my eyes, grateful for his lightness. You have no idea. As we settled in with our coffees, I told him everything, about Madison, the locks, the trust, Edward's discovery, even the letter from Grandma Tracy. I expected him to be shocked or angry, but instead he listened quietly, letting me spill out all my confusion and pain. When I finished, Justin tapped the table with his spoon. You know, Grandma warned me Madison might pull something like this someday. Said she could hold a grudge longer than a Carolina summer. I stared at him. She told you that? He nodded. She worried about you. About how hard it was for you at home, being, well, you. He gave me a sideways smile. Talented. Stubborn. Creative in a family that likes things neat. A strange warmth blossomed in my chest, validation, long overdue. I always thought she just liked me best because I listened to her old stories. Justin laughed. That too. But mostly, she admired that you kept going, even when nobody got it. Madison never forgave Grandma for giving you the sewing kit. It's wild, the things people carry. I took a deep breath. So what do I do, Justin? Is it worth it to fight? Or should I just let it go and start over somewhere else? He shrugged, but his eyes were serious. That's up to you. But let me say this, you're not wrong to want what's yours. And you don't have to do it alone. He squeezed my hand, rough and steady. If Grandma put all this in place, maybe she saw something you haven't yet. Maybe it's time to trust her faith in you. I felt a tremor of courage, small but real. We spent the next hour going through the paperwork, Justin highlighting passages that made my head spin. Look here, Madison and your parents had to notify you about any changes. They didn't. That's not just shady, it's illegal. And this fund? It's your shot, Em. Don't let them take it without a fight. On my phone, messages kept coming in. One from Edward Nash, let me know when you're ready to proceed. I can arrange a mediation, but you'll need to be there in person. Another, colder one, popped up later, from Madison, back off, or you'll regret it. This is your last warning. My hand shook. I showed Justin, who just raised his eyebrows. Classic Madison. She thinks if she barks loud enough, everyone else will back down. I swallowed hard. I'm scared, Justin. Not just of her, but of what comes after. What if I lose everything? What if this makes it worse? He reached across the table, his voice gentle. Sometimes, doing the right thing hurts. But hiding from it hurts worse. You deserve to live with your head up, not hunched over in fear. It took the rest of the day and another pot of coffee at his apartment before I finally made my decision. The thought of facing my family, of seeing the anger in Madison's eyes, the disappointment on Mom's face, made my stomach twist. But I kept thinking about Grandma's letter, about the way she'd written, "Never be afraid to fight for your own light." Maybe that meant stepping into a battle, even if it scared me. That night, I emailed Edward Nash back. "I'm ready to proceed. Scheduled a meeting. I'll be there." Within the hour, he replied, "Meeting set for next Tuesday 10 a.m. All parties have been notified. I'll be in touch with details." As I read his words, my hands trembled, but this time, it felt like energy, not just fear. For the first time in a long while, I was standing up for myself, not because I wanted a fight, but because I finally knew I was worth defending. Nothing prepares you for facing your family as strangers. That's how it felt that Tuesday morning, stepping into Edward Nash's law office, every muscle in my body wound tight as the rain drummed a steady, anxious beat against the glass. I'd barely slept. I tried to convince myself it was just another appointment, another meeting, but the truth is, my hands were ice cold and my heart felt like a stone in my chest. Grandma Tracy's words kept surfacing, "The truth always comes out." I wondered if she'd imagined a day like this, with her family gathered in a room not for a holiday or celebration, but for a reckoning. Edward's office looked even more imposing than last time, long conference table, windows streaked with water, a hush so heavy it threatened to choke out every word. The room was already filling when I arrived, Madison, sharp in her blazer, scrolling through her phone like she had somewhere better to be, Mom, her hair perfectly set, face pinched with worry, Dad, sitting stiff and silent at the far end, hands folded like he was praying. Justin caught my eye and offered a quick, reassuring nod. Julia Foster, Madison's attorney, took her seat with a practiced smoothness, lips pressed tight. I hung my coat and took the last chair, nerves prickling up and down my arms. Edward began, his voice calm and firm, laying out the purpose of the meeting. "We're here to discuss the administration of the Tracy Carson Trust and several possible breaches of fiduciary duty. I'd like to keep this civil." He looked at me, and for a heartbeat, I wanted to disappear. But then I remembered Justin's hand on my shoulder, and Grandma Tracy's letter folded inside my bag. I lifted my chin and listened. Edward detailed the facts, how I was never notified of my rights, how funds for my creative future had been diverted to kitchen remodels, vacations, even a new roof. As he spoke, he handed out copies of documents, spreadsheets, withdrawal slips, account summaries. It was all there, in black and white. Julia Foster, elegant and composed, countered in a voice dripping with concern. "We dispute the characterization of these withdrawals. All improvements benefited the family as a whole. And as for communication, my clients acted in good faith, there must have been a misunderstanding." I could feel Madison's eyes burning holes in me. She spoke up, her voice as cool as the rain outside. "Emily was never interested in being part of this family's legacy. She left, remember? We tried to help, but she couldn't get her act together. Why should she get another handout?" Linda reached for Madison's hand, pleading. "This is tearing us apart. Emily, honey, can't we work this out privately? Do we really need lawyers and threats?" I found myself shrinking in my chair, heart pounding. For so long, I'd absorbed their words, let their disappointment and denial seep into my bones. My mouth was dry, my mind swirling. I glanced at Dad, who sat unmoving, eyes fixed on the table as if by refusing to look up he could make all this vanish. That's when Justin leaned forward, voice clear. "With respect, Julia, Tracy Carson set up this trust because she was afraid something like this would happen. She wanted Emily to have a chance. I was there, she talked to me about it before she died." He turned to Madison. You were always resentful of that, Madison. Grandma gave Emily her sewing kit for a reason. She knew how hard it was for her here. The room went quiet, tension sharpening. I looked around at faces that had once been my whole world and saw strangers, people I'd spent years trying to please, never quite belonging. I took a breath. My hands trembled, but I steadied them in my lap. I'm not here for a handout. I'm here because Grandma wanted me to have a choice, to be safe. You all had a duty to tell me, and you didn't. You used my fund for things I never agreed to. I just want what's fair, and what was promised. Madison sneered. You're always the victim, aren't you? Always someone else's fault. I felt a familiar shame start to rise, but I pushed it down. No, Madison. I let you make me small for too long. I won't do it anymore. This isn't about being a victim, it's about standing up for myself. For once. Linda's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Emily. We thought we were doing what was best for the family. Please, can't we find another way? Edward stepped in, his tone gentle but resolute. It's clear there have been violations. The trust provides remedies, restoration of funds, appointment of an independent trustee, and restoration of Emily's right to reside at the home. My client is open to mediation, but she will not back down. Julia raised a hand, clearly buying time. We'd like 48 hours to consider our options before responding. Edward nodded. That's reasonable. We'll reconvene at the end of the week. And just like that, it was over, at least for now. I gathered my things, the sound of rain louder as we all stood. No hugs, no words of comfort, just tension and old grievances hanging in the air. As we filed out, Justin squeezed my arm. You did good, Em. Grandma would be proud. I smiled shakily, feeling both raw and relieved. For the first time, I'd spoken my truth without apology. I was exhausted, wrung out, but beneath the hurt there was something new, an ember of resolve that would not go out, no matter how the next 48 hours unfolded. Victory never feels the way you imagine, it's messier and lonelier, especially when it comes wrapped in family silence and the unfamiliar hush of a place you barely know. I'd pictured standing up for myself would end with fireworks or at least some kind of peace. Instead, all I felt was exhaustion and a bone-deep ache that didn't fade, even as the days passed and the dust settled from the confrontation at Edward Nash's office. The first morning in my temporary apartment, I woke before sunrise, listening to the hum of pipes in the old building, the creak of someone else's footsteps overhead. I'd signed a short-term sublet, barely more than a box with a window and a twin bed, because it was all I could afford until things were settled. My suitcases leaned against the wall, unopened. I found myself staring at the ceiling, wondering how to start a day that felt like it belonged to someone else. I wandered Asheville's streets with no destination in mind, letting the gentle thrum of city life fill the silence that pressed in around me. Even the air seemed unfamiliar, as if I'd slipped out of my old skin but hadn't found a new one yet. I bought coffee at a bakery and nursed it through the morning, answering texts from Justin and ignoring a few from numbers I didn't recognize. My phone kept buzzing with messages from Edward Nash, legalese about paperwork and settlement logistics. It was progress, but it didn't feel real. In the evenings, Justin would call to check in. Sometimes he'd invite himself over, bringing takeout and an easy laugh that helped cut the tension. We'd sit on the floor, eating noodles from paper cartons, talking about anything but family, music, weird local art, old memories of Grandma Tracy. Once, I told him I felt like a plant uprooted and sat on a windowsill, waiting to see if I'd bloom or wither. He just nodded and said, "Roots don't make the flower, Em. The light does. Give it time." But time was tricky. It stretched out, empty and echoing, full of second-guessing. I caught myself looking out the window, half expecting to see Madison's car, or to hear Linda's voice at my door. The anger from the law office had cooled, leaving behind a numbness that was somehow worse. There were moments when I thought about calling Madison or my mother, just to break the silence, but I always put the phone down. Some wounds need space before they can start to heal. After a week, Justin encouraged me to talk to someone who wasn't family. "You've been carrying their baggage for years," he said. "Maybe it's time to unpack some of it." He recommended Dr. Sharon Miller, a therapist he trusted, and after some hesitation, I made the call. Dr. Miller's office was warm and bright, full of books and plants and a big window overlooking the street. She greeted me with a calm, gentle voice that put me at ease almost immediately. "You've been through a lot," she said after I stumbled through a clumsy explanation of the past few weeks. "It makes sense you're feeling lost right now. Sometimes, when we finally set down a heavy burden, we don't know who we are without it." We talked about family, about what it meant to be the one left out, the one who never quite fit. I told her about Grandma Tracy, about the letter that had changed everything, about the courtroom and the hollow sense of winning. She listened without judgment, offering space for my grief and confusion. "Healing isn't about forgetting or pretending it didn't hurt," she told me. "It's about letting yourself become someone new, piece by piece." Outside her office, the world kept moving, leaves turning gold in the late summer sun, students rushing past with backpacks and coffee cups, couples arguing over what to have for dinner. Life was going on, indifferent to my private revolution. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry in the tiny apartment, my phone rang. Edward Nash's name appeared on the screen. I answered, heart pounding as always when his number flashed. "Emily," he said, his tone gentle but direct, "I have good news. Your family has accepted the settlement. The trust will provide for your new apartment, and the creative fund is fully restored. You're free to move forward, however you choose." I managed a thank you, my voice catching. After we hung up, I just stood there, holding a pair of socks, tears stinging my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer strangeness of it all. I'd won. I'd fought for something and gotten it. But there was no celebration, no welcome home. Just a stack of legal documents, a tiny apartment, and a vast, unfamiliar freedom. I spent the next day setting up my new space. I unpacked my sketchbooks, pinned old designs to the wall, and let the place take shape around me. It was quiet, almost too quiet at first, but little by little, I started to feel a flicker of possibility. I could choose how my days unfolded, what I worked on, where I went. The world was still wide open, even if my family's doors had closed. On my first night alone in the new apartment, I stood in the middle of the empty living room, the city lights flickering through the blinds. I let out a long, shaky breath, feeling the ache of loss and the sharp edge of hope twining together inside me. "Now what?" I whispered to the silence, not expecting an answer. Maybe freedom was just another word for beginning again, even when you don't know where to start. My new apartment felt more like a question than an answer, a blank space echoing with possibility and fear. On the first night, I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by a fortress of boxes, the overhead light buzzing as if it too was uncertain how to settle in. The walls were bare, the windowsills dusty, but the air was mine to breathe. I woke early, the city's gentle sounds filtering in, birds, someone jogging, a distant truck. There was a chill in the air, a holdover from winter, but the sunlight spilled across the scuffed hardwood, hinting at spring. I watched the dust motes swirl in the beam, thinking how strange it was that the future could look both empty and wide open. Boxes loomed in every direction, labeled in hasty marker, books, art, misc, and one that simply read Emily's. I opened it first. Inside was a patchwork of my old life, sketchbooks, a photo of Grandma Tracy and me at the county fair, a handful of dried flowers from last year's garden. On top, I found her sewing kit, sturdy, old, the lid worn soft by her hands. For a second, I just stared at it, the weight of her memory settling quietly on my chest. I set it on the windowsill, letting the sunlight warm its faded blue. Justin showed up mid-morning, 2 cups of coffee in one hand, a bag of breakfast burritos in the other. "If you're going to start over, you can't do it on an empty stomach," he declared, nudging a stack of boxes with his foot as he came in. We spent the next few hours in a flurry of activity, pushing the couch into place, hammering nails for picture frames, stringing up fairy lights around the kitchen window. Every now and then, Justin would pause to look at an old photo or a scrap of fabric, and we'd swap stories. The time we snuck out to watch fireworks, the birthday when Grandma Tracy made us matching scarves. Our laughter bounced off the empty walls, weaving a kind of warmth through the chill. As we worked, conversation drifted from the practical to the personal. Justin was quieter than usual, his jokes softer, and when we took a break on the floor with our burritos, he looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen since the mediation. "You know, Em, I'm proud of you," he said. "It's not easy to walk away from family, even when they give you every reason to." I shrugged, unsure what to say. "I don't know if it's brave or just desperate." "It's both," he said simply. "And that's okay." After he left, I felt a wave of fatigue, part relief, part sadness. I made myself some tea and opened my laptop, scrolling through a handful of old messages from Dr. Miller. "Routines can anchor us," she'd written. "Try starting small, a morning walk, a set time to sketch, a favorite song to mark the end of your day. Give yourself permission to just be here, now." Inspired, or maybe just longing for direction, I pulled out Grandma Tracy's letter from my desk drawer. Her words felt as fresh as the day I first read them. "Don't let anyone make you small, sweetheart." I traced the script with my finger, letting her voice chase away the lingering doubts. I opened her sewing kit, fingering the neat rows of thread and the tiny silver scissors. Each piece was a memory, a small reminder of all the beginnings she'd believed I could make. As sunlight poured in, I cleared a spot by the window and dragged over my battered design table. I laid out a blank sheet of paper and, for the first time in months, let myself draw. At first, my hand hesitated, the lines shaky and uncertain. But as I lost myself in the motion, curves, colors, fragments of an idea taking shape, I felt something open inside me, a door I thought had been locked for good. There was still grief, yes, and a thread of fear, but it was laced now with hope. Hours passed without my noticing. By afternoon, the apartment had begun to feel less like a holding cell and more like a canvas. I had sketches spread out, a mug of tea growing cold on the sill, sunlight slanting across the fabric scraps. Justin texted, "Pizza night at my place if you want a break from boxes." I smiled, thinking how lucky I was to have found a family in him, a real, chosen family, not just the one I'd been born into. As dusk settled, my phone chimed, a new email, subject line catching my eye, portfolio inquiry. I opened it with trembling hands. "Hi Emily. We saw your recent work online and would love to talk about featuring your designs at our boutique downtown. Are you available for a meeting next week?" I read it twice, hardly daring to believe. There it was, a chance, a door swinging open. For the first time in a long while, the echo in my apartment sounded less like emptiness and more like opportunity. I looked out the window, Grandma Tracy's sewing kit gleaming in the fading light, and whispered a silent thank you. Sometimes, starting over is the bravest design of all. Hope has a funny way of showing up in small, imperfect stitches. Some nights, it's nothing but a sliver of thread, barely enough to hold things together. but lately, that's been enough. The morning I walked into the downtown boutique, I was more nervous than I'd been at any job interview. The windows were full of color and wild creativity, painted shoes, beaded scarves, hand-thrown pottery, a place that felt alive. Inside, it smelled of lavender and cedar, with racks of clothes that each told their own story. I clutched my sketchbook so tightly the edges bent. Zoe, the owner, had emailed me after seeing my work online. She was a whirlwind of curls and bright scarves, her eyes alert and kind. She shook my hand with the kind of energy that made you want to believe in yourself, even when you didn't. "Let's see what you've got," she said, ushering me into the cozy back room. I fanned out my sketches, blouses inspired by Blue Ridge wildflowers, patchwork jackets, a dress that reminded me of summer thunderstorms. My voice shook as I explained my ideas, but Zoe nodded along, her excitement contagious. "These are fresh, Emily. You've got a real point of view. Let's try a test run. Can you make up a few samples? We'll put them in the window and see how people respond." Walking home, I was both elated and terrified. A chance, my chance. The old fears began creeping in. What if nobody liked them? What if I failed? I texted Justin for reassurance, and he answered in his usual way, "They'd be fools not to love your work. Just remember, even Picasso had off days." That night, I sat on my apartment floor, fabric everywhere, sewing machine humming. Grandma Tracy's old kit was open beside me, her silver thimble glinting in the lamplight. Every time my nerves threatened to take over, I heard her voice, "Never let them clip your wings, Em." Sometimes, just saying the words under my breath helped steady my hands. I met with Dr. Miller the next afternoon, running on too little sleep and too much coffee. "I keep thinking I'm going to mess up," I admitted. "It feels like the ground could disappear beneath me at any second." She listened, then smiled gently. "It's normal to feel exposed when you're taking risks. But every mistake is a stitch in the story you're creating. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to keep sewing." Her words stuck with me through the week. When a seam puckered, or a hem turned out uneven, I'd pull out the stitches, start again, and remind myself that growth wasn't supposed to be comfortable. As days passed, my little apartment filled with color, half-finished blouses, swatches pinned to the wall, threads trailing across the floor. Sometimes I'd work past midnight, music low, the city quiet outside my window. Each piece I finished was a small victory, a defiance of all the years I'd been told I was wasting my time. When I brought the finished designs to Zoe, she grinned. "You did it, Emily. Let's make this window sing." We arranged my clothes on mannequins, right up front. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at my work behind glass, feeling something inside me settle, a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in years. The first sale came 2 days later. A customer bought the blue floral blouse I'd almost given up on. Zoe called to tell me, her excitement pouring through the phone. I danced around my apartment, laughing and crying at once. Late that evening, when the adrenaline finally faded, I checked my voicemail. There was a message from Madison, her voice low, urgent. "Emily, it's me. We need to talk. It's important. Please call when you get this." Her words echoed in the quiet, mixing with the thrill of my small triumph. For the first time, I felt ready to face whatever came next. Sometimes hope is sown, not found, one imperfect stitch at a time. Some doors never stay closed, not when family is on the other side. Madison's voicemail echoed in my mind for days, its importance coiled tight in my stomach. I tried to ignore it, focusing on work, on sewing, on anything that would drown out the past. But every time I glanced at Grandma Tracy's sewing kit, I knew that if I wanted real freedom, I'd have to face the wounds I'd spent so long stitching over. Finally, I texted Madison back, "Let's meet somewhere public." Her reply was nearly instant, suggesting the cafe off Main, then changing it to the park when I didn't answer right away. I almost canceled a dozen times that morning, but something kept me moving, curiosity, maybe, or the hope that this chapter could be finished on my terms. The sky was gray when I arrived at the little park on the river. Spring tried to break through, but the air was still sharp, branches bare. Madison sat on a bench, her posture as rigid as ever, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I sat down, a safe distance away, feeling the old tension snap between us like a rubber band. She broke the silence first. "Thanks for coming. I know you didn't have to." Her voice was tired, thinner than I remembered. I kept my hands folded in my lap. "You said it was important." She nodded, swallowing hard. "It is. Emily, I messed up. We all did, but me most of all." She stared at the river, voice cracking. "I was jealous. Of Grandma's attention, of the way you never seemed to care what anyone thought. I know I was hard on you. I'm not good at not being in control." The admission hung in the air. I waited, not trusting the apology yet. "You hurt me, Madison. You locked me out, took what wasn't yours, and tried to make me feel small for wanting a place to belong." Madison blinked quickly, eyes rimmed red. "I know. I thought I was protecting the family. I thought you'd come crawling back and I could keep you safe by keeping you close. But it just made everything worse." She fumbled for her bag, pulling out a paper. "I've started seeing someone, a counselor. I'm trying to not be so angry all the time." I studied her face, searching for the manipulation I'd come to expect. This time, I saw something rawer, guilt, yes, but also confusion and fear. Maybe she was finally learning how to be vulnerable. Or maybe this was just another kind of performance. The truth, I realized, was that it didn't matter anymore. My healing couldn't depend on her change. "I can't fix this for you, Madison," I said softly. "I can't make you less angry or more forgiving. All I can do is choose what's right for me." I took a breath, heart pounding. "I'm not coming back. I need space, and I need you to respect it." Madison nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. She wiped them away, not bothering to hide them. "I want us to be sisters again someday. But I get it. I really do." She hesitated, then stood, glancing down at me with a flicker of her old defiance. "You know, Grandma always said you'd make something beautiful out of all this." Maybe she was right. I watched her walk away, feeling a complicated mix of relief and sorrow. We weren't healed. We weren't close. But something had shifted, an ending that felt, if not happy, at least honest. Later that day, I sat in Dr. Miller's office, recounting every detail. She listened quietly, nodding as I described the awkwardness, the anger, the faint sense of release. "Closure isn't always a warm embrace," she said. "Sometimes it's just the moment you realize you don't need their approval to move forward." I left her office lighter than I'd felt in months. Maybe I couldn't ever have the family I wanted. Maybe forgiveness was a door that would stay closed, at least for now. But I'd done what I needed, faced the past, set a boundary, and claimed my own space. That evening, as I was sorting through swatches for Zoe's boutique, my phone chimed, a new email. Subject: Blue Ridge Regional Fashion Showcase Invitation. My heart skipped. I opened it, scanning the details, an opportunity to present my designs, to share my work with the world beyond old hurts and family shadows. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, feeling the old ache of loss blend with the bright possibility of something new. Some doors, I realized, you close yourself. Others, you finally have the courage to open. I always thought happiness looked like a perfect family, but maybe it's something you build for yourself, piece by piece, out of new memories and fresh starts. Preparing for the Blue Ridge Regional Fashion Showcase felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, heart pounding, both terrified and exhilarated. The morning of the event, my apartment was chaos, spools of thread rolling under the table, sketches taped up everywhere, half a dozen outfits bagged and ready. Sunlight poured in the window, catching the edge of Grandma Tracy's sewing kit and sending rainbows dancing across the walls. Justin sent a flurry of texts, "You got this, superstar. And don't trip on the runway." I smiled in spite of my nerves, grateful for the web of support I'd started to weave for myself. Zoe called, her voice bubbling with encouragement. "You've worked so hard for this, Emily. Whatever happens today, remember that you belong here." The showcase venue was all bustle and color, a renovated mill with big windows and polished wood floors. Designers hurried past, arms full of fabric and dreams. I set up my corner, arranging my clothes with shaking hands, but by the time the doors opened, a kind of calm settled over me. I looked around and realized, these people didn't know my story. They saw my work. For the first time, that was enough. Zoe introduced me to a few other designers, and within minutes we were swapping stories, about bad stitching days, impossible deadlines, the wild hope of creating something out of nothing. A local reporter stopped to snap photos of my patchwork jacket. A boutique owner took my card, promising to be in touch. Each small success built on the last, until I felt almost weightless, as if every hard day had brought me to this one, sunlit afternoon. When my slot came, I stood by my mannequins as guests wandered through. A young woman stopped, touching the sleeve of my wildflower blouse. "I've never seen anything like this," she said softly. "It reminds me of my grandmother's garden." I thanked her, heart full. Afterward, Justin and Zoe found me outside, where strings of lights twinkled in the early evening. We clinked paper cups of sparkling water in a little toast, laughing about how Zoe had to chase a curious toddler away from the display. "I'm proud of you, Em," Justin said, squeezing my shoulder. "Look at what you've built, all by yourself." For a moment, I let myself believe it. The old ache was still there, but now it was joined by something brighter, a sense of belonging I'd never found at the Carson dinner table. Later, I checked my phone. Dr. Miller had left a voicemail, "I hope you're celebrating tonight. You've done more than survive, Emily, you've created a home within yourself. That's real progress." As the night wore on, I walked home, the cool air tinged with lilac and distant music. My apartment was quiet when I returned, but it no longer felt empty. I hung my showcase pass on the wall, next to my sketches and Grandma Tracy's letter. I made a mug of tea and watched the city lights, letting gratitude settle in beside the ache. That's when I noticed the envelope on the doormat, a soft, familiar script. I picked it up, my heart stuttering. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Emily. I'm sorry. Mom." I stood there for a long time, the apology small but heavy in my hands. It didn't change the past, didn't erase the pain, but it was something. Maybe, like happiness, forgiveness was something you built for yourself, in your own time, in your own way. I closed the door behind me, the light spilling across the floor, and knew that, for the first time, I truly felt at home. Forgiveness isn't a single act, it's 100 small choices to let go. I learned that over slow mornings in my apartment, with Linda's letter sitting unopened on the kitchen table, its presence a weight and a question. Some days, I'd make coffee and stare at the envelope, tracing the shape of her handwriting. Sometimes I felt angry, sometimes just tired. I told myself there was no deadline for forgiveness, no rulebook for how or when to answer. On a quiet Wednesday, after a night of restless dreams, I finally broke the seal. Emily. I know a letter can't undo years of hurt. I was wrong, and I see that now. I wish I'd listened to you, not just heard you. I wish I'd understood what Grandma Tracy tried to teach us both about love and letting go. If you can find it in your heart, I hope you'll let me be part of your life again, however you decide that looks. I am sorry. I love you, always. Mom. I read it twice, then set it down, my hands shaking. There was no big promise, no request for a meeting, just regret and hope, side by side. I let myself cry, not just for the mother I'd lost, but for the girl who'd spent so long trying to earn love that should have been given freely. Later, I walked through the neighborhood, the city waking up around me, sunlight slanting across front steps, a dog barking in the distance, someone's radio playing a Motown song out an open window. I thought about Linda's words, about my own capacity to heal. Maybe we both had growing up to do, even now. After lunch, my phone rang. Linda. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me said, answer. The conversation was awkward, both of us tripping over our words, but it was honest. She apologized again, voice breaking. I wish I'd been stronger for you, Em. I wish I'd seen how much you needed support, not judgment. I listened. I told her I believed she was sorry. But I also said, I can't pretend everything's okay now, Mom. I need time, and I need you to respect my boundaries. I'm still figuring out who I am, on my own terms. There was silence, then a quiet, I understand. I'll be here, whenever you're ready. After, I called Dr. Miller. We talked about the strange shape of forgiveness, how it isn't about forgetting or excusing, but about releasing the hold the past has on you. You get to decide, she reminded me. You can let people in a little at a time, or not at all. You're allowed to keep your peace. I spent that evening with Justin. We made pasta, watched an old movie, laughed about nothing. He squeezed my hand and said, "Look how far you've come, Em. Not everyone gets out of those old shadows." I hugged him, grateful all over again for the ways chosen family can heal you when blood ties can't. That night, I sat at my design table, the apartment soft with lamplight, Grandma Tracy's sewing kit open beside me. I realized I was finally done chasing approval from people who couldn't give it. The work I'd done, the life I was making, was enough. As I was getting ready for bed, an email chimed in. Invitation, Blue Ridge Creatives Collaborative Project. They wanted my brand, my name, on the list. Suddenly, my future felt as wide open as the sky outside my window. Healing, I realized, was not a finish line but a path, winding and uncertain. Each day I chose to forgive a little, I felt lighter, more myself. In the end, I learned that home isn't a place or a person, it's the life you build for yourself, day by day, with each choice and each act of courage. I never thought I'd look around and feel real belonging in a place I decorated myself, among people I chose to call family. But here I was, a year after the confrontation that changed everything, watching the late afternoon sun slip across the living room walls of my apartment, the air full of the sounds of a life being lived. Grandma Tracy's legacy ran through every stitch of my new collection. As I set out the last of the finished designs, cotton dresses, embroidered tops, a jacket lined with a fabric she'd once saved for me, I thought about how far I'd come. Her sewing kit still sat on my windowsill, the thimble catching the light, a reminder of hands that guided me even when she was gone. My workspace was no longer cramped, the walls were full of sketches, patterns, postcards from friends. Hope, once something I had to imagine, was now something I could see and touch. The collaborative project had taken shape faster than I expected. Zoe and I, along with 2 other local designers, launched our pop-up studio in a cheerful storefront off the main street. We painted the walls ourselves, built display shelves from old palettes, and strung up photos of our families and inspirations, proof that dreams could take root in unexpected places. Justin showed up on opening day with a bouquet of wildflowers and a grin. "Told you you'd make it, Em," he said, hugging me until I laughed. We celebrated our first week with a small gathering, coffee, homemade cookies, music on someone's phone. My new colleagues, Rosette and Leah, were as warm as old friends, swapping stories about impossible deadlines and the little joys that made it all worthwhile. In that circle of laughter and shared ambition, I felt something shift. There was no room for the old ache of not belonging. On quiet mornings, I sometimes caught myself looking back, but the pain of the past felt softer, the anger faded. The old Carson house was just an address now, a place I'd outgrown. My mother and Madison reached out occasionally, short notes, polite but distant. Sometimes I replied, sometimes I didn't. I'd stopped waiting for more. One evening, after everyone had left the studio, I walked home through the city's golden dusk. My steps felt lighter, my breath easier. The world seemed to greet me, not with suspicion or judgment, but with welcome. When I reached my apartment, I opened the window and let the fresh air in, then sat at my desk, pencil in hand. I drew without thinking, just the movement of my hand, the sound of the city, the comfort of being alone but never lonely. I thought about Grandma Tracy, the trust she placed in me, the way her faith had been the seed for everything that had grown. I thought of Justin's loyalty, Zoe's encouragement, the small kindnesses that had woven my new life together. I thought, too, about forgiveness, not as a gift I gave to my family, but as a freedom I claimed for myself. There were still hard days, setbacks, and moments when doubt tried to creep in. But the difference now was that I knew I could weather them. I had my work, my friends, and a future I shaped with my own hands. I lit a candle on the windowsill, set out my sketchbook, and watched the last light fade. With every quiet breath, I felt gratitude for how far I'd come, for the scars that taught me resilience, for the loneliness that opened the door to new connections, for the courage to define home on my own terms. And so I wrote, in the back of my sketchbook, a line I'd never dared believe before. For the first time, I feel truly at home. As I sit by my window, sketchbook in hand and sunlight warming the threads of my latest design, I'm reminded that real home is something we carry inside, built from every choice to love, forgive, and start again. Life taught me that family doesn't always look the way we expect, and sometimes the greatest strength is found in letting go of old wounds to make room for new beginnings. If we can listen with compassion and treat one another with kindness, even the hardest journeys can lead us home in the end. If this story touched your heart or brought back a memory of your own, I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Thank you for sharing this time with me. May your days ahead be filled with warmth, understanding, and gentle hope.